Cool. So we've learned about pods, we've learned about deployments, replica sets. Now let's go ahead and learn about Kubernetes services. So throughout this course, I've been showing you how to access the application using port forward, right? So when we build applications, we want to be able to access our applications, right? So whether it's through a client or service to service, so microservice talking to another microservice. So we want to be able to access the application. So how do we do it? Now, I've been telling you that using port forwarding is only for testing purposes. You should never use port forward. Instead, you should be using services. So you've seen that we have deployments. Within a deployment, we have a replica set, and then the replica set manages each individual pod. So here, let's say that we just have 3 pods, and you also learn that each pod has its own IP address. Now let's take a client, and the client now needs to access the application. So how does the client does it? The client could have a list of each IP address associated with each pod. But as I said, pods, they are short-lived because you have software deployments, as you've seen with the rollouts. If a new pod comes in, then a new version of the application is up and running with a new IP address, which means that the client cannot rely on the IP address on its own, right? It's not reliable. So instead, we use services. Now, again, the reason why we cannot use the IP address for the pod itself is that it's because it's unreliable. If we scale up or down, we have new IP addresses. So never rely on pod IP addresses. So instead, in our case, where the client wants to communicate with our application, we use services or a Kubernetes service. So this is an object in Kubernetes, and you'll see how everything works. So now that we have the service, this is much more reliable because the service in itself comes with an IP address. So this IP address never changes. It's a stable IP address. It also comes with a stable DNS name and a stable port. Now, when it comes to services, we have a couple of types. We have cluster IP, node port, external name, and load balancer. So you'll see all of these 4 types in action. So this is how the clients should be talking to our application and not using port forwarding.